Hi, welcome to the Israel First television program from our studios in Jerusalem on the 50 years of the liberation of the city of Jerusalem, and we're bringing you news, interviews and features from the land for you. And today in the studio you're going to be very excited. We've got Daniel Luria. Thanks, Daniel, for coming in and taking your time to give us a background to the city of Jerusalem and your work there. It's the 50 years. We've just celebrated the 50 years of the liberation, not occupation of Jerusalem, the freeing of Jerusalem. And I've got a news story here. It's returning to Jerusalem. This is from Israel National News. It says, if I can just get this on the camera, returning to Jerusalem, the Yemenite synagogue of Shiloah. And we're going to be talking today about the return of the Jewish people to the old city particularly to the old city of Jerusalem, and also to the area which many of you will know as the Mount of Olives and the Yemenite village. So we have Daniel in the studio. Thank you, Daniel, for giving us your time again. Daniel is the Executive Director and Spokesman for the Jerusalem Reclamation Project, which reclaims properties seized from the Jewish people in the pogroms. He's originally from Melbourne, Australia. Now we know we have a lot of viewers from Australia, so he's from Melbourne and came to live in Israel in 1995. He's previously worked for the Jerusalem municipality and is a very sought-after spokesperson for Jewish rights to all of Jerusalem. Daniel's been featured on BBC News, Fox News, Al Jazeera, SBS Australia, in the New York Times, Guardian newspaper, Jerusalem Post, Times of Israel, Israel National News, and the Associated Press. So you've been in a lot of the media, and maybe we'll touch about that and the battle for the media in Israel, because that's a whole topic in itself. But maybe for our viewers, it's the first time they've seen you. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how an Australian has now ended up moving from all the way across the world to come and live in Jerusalem.
Well, the truth is, first of all, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you very much for inviting me. The whole story about how I ended up even in Jerusalem is a long one. I'm not going to tell you or the viewers how the whole thing started, but the truth is I started to walk to Jerusalem from Melbourne, which is a long way, when I was actually 11 or 12 years old, due to my upbringing. And the truth is, most Jews are brought up knowing that even though Australia, we may have a house there, the true home is always in Israel. At least that was the upbringing I had. It was a religious Zionist upbringing. It was not a matter of if, it was a matter of when we would come back home. But it's unbelievable that I'm part of this unfolding, what we call the redemption process or the Zionist dream. There are many words that could be used for what is unfolding in Israel today. And yes, well, we just celebrated, you mentioned the 50 years, although I'm a little bit cautious about the 50 years. The truth is, for me, it's 3,850 years. Our connection with Israel clearly goes back way earlier than the 50 years. Of course, it was liberated. And the truth is, occupation doesn't bother me too much, because so long as it's occupied by the Jewish people, the 12 tribes, the Jewish world, it's fine. Unfortunately, it's been turned into a very negative word by many people in the world, as though that we are the illegal occupiers, but nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, when you hear the appalling ignorance by the UNESCO and other world bodies claiming that there's no connection or bond between the Jewish people, it shouts out to the heavens. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to prove to anyone, and I don't need to prove to anyone, but we do have this 3,800 plus year connection with Jerusalem, and there's really nothing the world can do about it. You know, we are back home today, and some tremendous things have happened. And
the historical background and the geography, as well as the Bible. You know, there's all the evidence, and maybe we might talk a bit about that in the program. The evidence of the Jewish people living in Jerusalem for the centuries, and the discoveries of the city of David, where the archaeological discoveries they're doing. So tell us a bit about, because you've come today and
Ateret Kohanim, yes.
Yeah,
I mean, the name of the organisation actually has a few different names. One is Jerusalem Reclamation Project. Over the last few years, we've more or less used the name Jerusalem Lives, Yerushalayim Chai. The original name is Ateret Kohanim, which means a crown of priests, but with nothing to do with the priests or the Temple Mount. It's all to do with the revival of Jewish life in and around the Old City. We believe, as I'm sure many of your viewers understand, that Jews have a right to live anywhere in Jerusalem, especially in a neighbourhood where Jews were evicted from not so long ago. You know, most people don't even realize that there was a Jewish majority inside the old city 130, 150 years ago. Before there was Silwan, there was a Jewish Yemenite village. Before there was Sheikh Jarrah, there was Shimon HaTzadik neighborhood. All of these, what is today known as Arab neighborhoods in Greater Jerusalem or United Jerusalem, only came about because of pogroms and riots. So for someone to say that a Jew doesn't have a right to buy or to live in any neighborhood, there's a certain touch of Yud and Ryan there that we've heard from dark past, which I don't want to go into. And so it's something unacceptable.
It's a bit like there was ethnic cleansing. There was when the Arabs had the pogroms and the riots.
Correct.
Which the media doesn't seem to cover, and we don't really hear about that. But the pogroms...
1920, 28, 29,
right.
36, 37. In fact, I should have brought with me, I forgot to bring with me, I have this amazing letter from the British High Commissioner in August of 1938. And remember, we're talking about a Jewish village that was under fire from the rioting Arabs in the pogroms of the 20s and the 30s. But now it's 1938. The old Yemenite village, they had 144 Yemenite families. Before it was this Arab Silwan. Yemenite village, pure. There were Arabs that started to live there because the Jews came back there, that's true. But the British, instead of actually protecting, adding more policemen, the Jews there, they take out the Jewish residents, and there's a letter from the British High Commissioner saying that he hopes that the Jewish refugees can return shortly to their homes. Now that's a British promise and understanding that it's a Jewish neighbourhood, not an Arab neighbourhood, that the Jews are the refugees and they clearly have a right to go back there. Today I'm not sure how many British parliamentarians would even recognise this part of town of being a Jewish village, but that's the reality. So there's a certain amount of historical truth which is just not out there. So we've gone back to that area that is the middle of, today is called Silwan, at least in certain
So if
corners.
we're looking with the geography for our viewers who may not be aware of how Silwan, the old city, the Mount of Olives, many of you may well have been to Jerusalem and they've visited the Mount of Olives. So if they're in Jerusalem, where would they look towards to see the Silwan?
If you could imagine the old city and the Western Wall, you've got, when you leave the Western Wall area, one of the gates that you would leave is called Shar Ashpot, the Dung Gate. And when you leave that gate, very close to the old city, you can go down the road and you hit the City of David, a phenomenal visitor centre archaeological site, once again showing our connection for thousands of years. The City of David, half Jewish, half Arab, 70, 80 odd families already live there. On the other side of the valley, now in the valley there is the Shiloah Springs where the kings were anointed and where the water was taken for the Temple Mount. On the other side of the valley was the old Yemenite village. So it's adjacent to the City of David on the slopes of the Mount of Olives overlooking the Temple Mount. It is magnificent, whichever house you go to.
So Daniel, can you tell us what it's like to live in the old city? You're doing a fantastic work getting the Jewish people back into the old city because of the pogroms that had to leave, and now they're coming back. What's it like on a day-to-day basis for the families who live there?
Well, first of all, we should say that anyone living, whether it be in the old Jewish quarter of the old city or in the other neighbourhoods that we've got, which is just what we call in the Holy Basin, just outside the old city, which is like the Mount of Olives, the old Yemenite village, Kidmat Zion, it's slightly different. Inside the old city, numbers makes the difference. You have 1,000 Jews, you have some streets there where there's 14 families, a centre of Jewish learning and a synagogue and a kindergarten. No one's going to throw stones and Molotov cocktails because your next door neighbour is a Jew. So it's a lot quieter in the old city. I'm not saying there hasn't been incidents. Unfortunately, there have been. There are things being thrown from rooftops, and the police recently came to us and wanted us to put cameras, for example, on some of our rooftops to try and stop or at least catch some of the Arabs who are, and it's not all Arabs, but those who are involved in terrorist activities, to try and catch them by having these cameras around the place. One of our rabbis, Rabbi Nehemiah Lavi, last year was murdered when he came down to help another woman who was walking just, from the Western Wall to the Damascus Gate, and her husband was killed, and she was called for help, and he came down, and then he was killed. It was a nightmare and tragedy. So I'm not going to say that nothing's ever happened, but it's relatively quiet, and it hasn't stopped us not living and not walking around because our families are ideologically driven. But another level altogether is the Yemenite village. The Yemenite village, in the middle of what is today called, what the Arabs called Silwan. We like calling it either the City of David, which is a separate story, and I'm talking about the Yemenite village of Shiloah. There are a number of Arab clans there that are sadly very full of hate, incitement. even towards other Arabs. You know, there's no shortage of Arabs who just want to live in peace, put food on the table, and live side by side with Jews. And they know that life is better under the Jews. There was a survey done recently, I loved it. It was 63% of the Arabs in Jerusalem prefer to be under Jewish sovereignty than under the PLO or Hamas. That tells you something about the others as opposed to living with Jews. But unfortunately, there are some very violent clans there. One of our families was attacked 126 times in a 4-month period last year. And that's Molotov cocktails, concrete box, one time a washing machine. I mean, this is sick education. It is incitement that they're hearing in certain quarters. And it's something which is spreading very easily because via the internet today, it's not like 50 years ago where if some imam spoke in a church, in a mosque, then no one would hear about it. Today, within seconds, hundreds of thousands of people. And the PA, when they name a town square after some sick terrorist, what message does that give when they give money and wages to families of terrorist families? What message does that give to a little kid in kindergarten? So we're up against a lot. Just a few days ago, on the last Sabbath, one of my friends, one of the families who lives there, his car was firebombed for the second time. And he doesn't even get money back totally from the government because they don't look after the first few months so they get the money back. It's usually a shortfall. So it's a little bit of a nightmare, but what the Arabs are starting to understand is that violence ain't going to drive us out. In relation to the families living there, as you asked earlier, in addition to being ideologically motivated, which clearly they are, it's actually a logistical nightmare living in some of these places. I mean, until about 2 years ago, we had families going in and out with a bulletproof Jeep just to get home.
So, in other words, they've got problems with the roads.
Transport going in and out because they are attacked even on the road there. Today, however, in the Yemenite village, because we've gone from 9 to 19 families, we've started to walk into the village. But imagine, you've got 19 families, there's nowhere really to drive in, there's no car parking like a regular neighbourhood. Who goes first? Who goes second? Which kids go in and out on the vehicle, walking in and out? Security guards front and back. There's security guards in the house. It is really very difficult. The old city has its own issues because obviously you can't drive in, but that applies to everyone unless you have a place right next to the Jewish quarter car park, which we don't because we're on the other side in the old Jewish quarter. It's not simple just going to a doctor, getting groceries in and out. A few months ago, one of the residents started a business actually. He bought one of these little trucks and now he's got the opportunity. He helps people taking in and out, taking vegetables and fruits, going backwards and forwards. So some things are a little bit easier. You have to be very strong, ideologically motivated and committed, not just because of your neighbours who may not like you, some of them, but also logistically. But thank God there's no shortage of families who want to live there. There's also no shortage of Arabs ready to sell. We just have to be very careful how these deals take place. And I didn't mention it earlier, but there is something that your viewers should know, and that is it only takes place in Jerusalem. It doesn't happen anywhere in the world. If you sell to a Jew, you're killed. It's a law. It's an Arab law.
This is if you're an Arab who owns a building, or and you'd like to sell to a Jewish person.
He's killed. It's a fatwa, it's an edict that says if you sell to a Jew, you are killed. Then not only that, but they can apparently now, not apparently, they do, they even can torture the middlemen that may be used. So every acquisition, obviously on this program, I can't talk about every aspect, but we do everything possible to protect the Arab who is selling. It's not straightforward, and this law should not exist. Why isn't the world jumping up and down about that? Why isn't the world jumping up and down when Jews are attacked because they're living just simply in a neighborhood? You know that there are Arabs living in Jewish neighborhoods in Jerusalem? No one says anything about that because there's nothing wrong with that. An Arab has the right to live, and they do, in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood. So why can't a Jew buy in a predominantly Arab neighborhood today, especially if it's an old Jewish neighborhood? So when you hear these world leaders in their arrogance and ignorance saying that a Jew has no right to buy and live in certain areas, who do they think they are? So
and it's really anti-Semitism that they're not allowing the Jewish people to live back in the land of Israel, their historical homeland, after 1967, coming back, reclaiming it, the city of Jerusalem, excitement with it's in our hands, the Western Wall again, and the city of
Temple
Jerusalem.
Mount is in our hands, the Western Wall, the old city. We came back.
And you're living to see that. And one of the interesting things, Daniel, is that with the Trump administration, whilst things haven't completely changed, that you do feel a sense that there is a change in the wind, that there is a swing towards helping Israel, helping the Jewish people, because you're the spokesman for Ateret Kohanim and the Jerusalem Life and the Reclamation Project, and you've had experience having to deal with negative media, journalists who have one agenda that they want to promote, putting the Jewish people down. So do you find that there's a sense that things are changing?
Well, I'm not seeing a huge change necessarily in the media, and it doesn't bother me. I really couldn't care what any news outlet says, and they keep on talking about East Jerusalem occupation. It's really irrelevant. 100 years' time, my grandchildren are going to be here, and all these empires who thought they could drive out the Jews, and media outlets who speak negative, they're bylines in history books. So from that point of view, I don't care. With regards to the wins, the political changes, it's nice, I hope something happens, but at the end of the day, it depends on what we do, what we say, and God's roadmap. We have roadmaps from the Quartet. We have roadmaps of the United Nations. We have the Arab League. We have everyone with their roadmap, but unless you're a religious person understanding that there is a slightly higher authority with his roadmap, that's what counts. And that depends on our own behaviour. So although it's fantastic having an ambassador that appreciates and understands Judea and Samaria, United Jerusalem, it's fantastic having a vice president that also understands, because he's got a religious background, that it's a no-brainer. How could you even think of dividing the land of Israel? There are a lot of good people out there, but ultimately it depends on what we say. If we say Oslo is dead, Oslo's dead. And as it is, it's really dead. If we say Judea and Samaria belongs to Jewish people, then that's what will happen. The world will scream, the world can shout, but who cares? What are they going to do? I don't think America's going to scream like it did in the past. We have to do what is right. We cannot afford, first of all, to annoy God. Secondly, we cannot afford to have a terrorist state on our back doorstep. In a neighbourhood where we're seeing Muslim fundamentalism and radical Islam taking over parts of the Middle East and Europe, which absurd government would bring or allow any possibility for that type of lifestyle to encroach on the small land of Israel? We're not talking about a huge land of Israel. This is a tiny area, the land of Israel. So leave us alone, is my message to the world that says we should divide. There's never been a Palestinian nation. There's never been a Palestinian capital. There's never been a Palestinian state. There's never been a Palestinian state. Why would we give away the only Jewish home that we've had a 3,800-year connection with to a people that don't exist? I'm not saying there is no issue that has to be dealt with. Of course it has to be dealt with. But you don't do it by shooting yourself in the foot. You don't do it by handing away your city, your country, your Temple Mount. None of that. That's not going to happen. The solutions, there are a number. I'm not sure whether we've got time and this is the place to do it, but there are other options.
And what we've seen, Daniel, is that the media, the battle for the media has been fought with all due respect. There are some good Arab people living there, but there's a lot of people who will try to rewrite history or to say there was never any Jewish presence in the old city and that the Temple Mount is really the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and we have this phenomenon. And of course, the famous West Bank bleak occupation mantra we hear from the left-wing press. Do you think we can change this? Is there a way of speaking to the
No.
You don't think we can win that?
No, I don't think it's possible. There are people out there that do not want the Jewish state. There are enough people out there that are in control of enough media outlets that are not prepared to accept any Jewish state, any state of Israel. And therefore it makes no difference what I say. It makes no difference what we say. Sure, we could do more. I mean, this program obviously does a lot by recognising that it's Judea and Samaria, not West Bank. That we are the indigenous people. We are not illegal occupiers. We're legal occupiers, thank God, of the Jewish homeland that God gave the Jewish people. There are many things that are very real. I can talk to today till tomorrow that the old city had a Jewish majority. Will the world accept that? Not necessarily. Will the world accept that it was an old Yemenite village in the city of David before it was thought of Silwan? I mean, you hear people, which is phenomenal, you hear people saying, been in Silwan for hundreds and hundreds of years. There was no one outside the walls of the old city till about 1860. I mean, there are certain facts. Mark Twain, this is a beautiful story. Mark Twain was 150 years ago in Jerusalem. Now, he wrote, correctly, deserts, swamps, the grandeur of Jerusalem has been lost, the greatness of Solomon, where is it gone? There are internet sites set up against Mark Twain by left-wing and Arab different organisations claiming he never left the hotel, he sipped wine and had cheese in the Mediterranean hotel. So what can you do? The fact that they even talk about that there was no temple is also absurd. But what can you do? If you believe in an absurd lie, you'll go with it all the way to the end. And there's probably very little I can do to change that. The only people you can maybe understand are those who are sitting on the fence.
Thank you so much for coming. So many
Pleasure.
more questions we want to ask you, Daniel, but we've run out of time.
No problem.
Thank you so much
Pleasure.
for coming
Shalom,
in
shalom.
today. And don't forget, you can also, I'm sure, go to look at some of the things that Daniel's doing on the internet with Jerusalem High. And I think you've got some YouTube videos and things they can
There's
see.
YouTube videos. There's also www.jerusalemchai.org if anyone wants to go in and understand more and even support in their own little small way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
So Shalom dear friends, today we are looking at a very special name, and it's Ezer Kenegdo. It's written in Genesis 2:18. Let us read. The Lord God, which is Yehovah Elohim, say, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make her Ezer Kenegdo for him." Okay, so when you look at the name Ezer, in English we try to translate it as a helper, as a head fit, as a well-matched helper or assistant. So we go to look more in the Hebrew, where does that come from? And if you look at Ezer, the root name is Oz, and Oz means power and strength. So it's interesting to see also, like in the scriptures, it's said 21 times, and it's more directed to God, that He is the one who can rescue us. He's the one who gives us strength to be able to do whatever we want to do. So it's interesting. So this Ezer Kenegdo, we can see that God is giving a power to Adam to be able to help him. So this is interesting. It's like his strength, okay? And if we look also at Kenegdo, which is just after Ezer Kenegdo, it's like to give what is this Ezer? Kenegdo, Ke is like, Neged is against, and O is for him. So it's like against him, or like also opposite him, we can say. And it's a bit like if you see you have two hands, and your two hands, they are opposite. My thumb is on this side. It's not like that. We are like that. And they are coming together, and they are opposite, but they are fitting very well together. And it's like, I will help you and I will strengthen you. So this is all the things we like put under this name Ezer Kenegdo, which is what God wants to give to Adam. Now it's interesting because again, when we read, it's written that God say it's not good that man is alone. Lo tov, it is not good. And usually in Genesis say it's good, it's good, it's good. And suddenly here in Genesis 2:18 it says it's not good. And he's like, yes, it's not good, lo tov, because he wants Adam to be able to have Ezer Kenegdo, and he's not by himself, levado, which is he is by himself. Okay. It's interesting also because you can see two names of kings who carry this name Oz, like Uzziah. It comes again from this name Oz, and Uzziah will mean like strength comes from God. And you have also Azariah, and again is Ezer, so my helper is God. So you see it picks up again this name of Oz and of Ezer. So we've learned few words today, and we just look at it. In Genesis 2:18, God is giving this strength to man. The woman will be his strength, and is opposite, but in a way to be very close to him, and they are strong together, okay? And so we see this name, and is the women, Ezer Kenegdo. And so we see this name, we say Oz, which is power and strength, and our God is our Oz, is our strength. We have Lo Tov, which means this was not good, that man was alone. And before in Genesis you can see, oh, Ze tov, and suddenly is Ze lo tov. This is not good because he was by himself. And so man by himself is ha'adam levado. He's by himself. And being a Lord is levad. So I hope that you enjoy the words of this week. And if you want to learn more, so this is my book that I've done. Very simple book. It's really an introduction to the Hebrew letters, to the beauty of the Hebrew letters, and to see the importance of the Hebrew that God is giving back to us to really communicate. Is like, you know, a bride and a bridegroom coming together and be able to communicate without a third party. And I think this is something that you will really enjoy. And you can go on our website and you can purchase it over there with PayPal. It's very simple, and I hope that it will bless a lot of people. And we will see you next week to learn some new words. Bye.
Hope you enjoyed that segment. Great to have Daniel Luria. Thank you so much for coming in today from the Jerusalem Reclamation Project and Jerusalem High, Jerusalem Life. Don't forget you can visit the website www.israelfirst.org and email us. We love to receive your emails and we'll try and put them on the programs. That's info@israelfirst.org. And we'll remember, we're the program that looks at the land, the people and the language.